My name is Lenora, and I gave up my entire bonus to pay off my parents' debt, only to come home and find a brand new Tesla in the driveway, bought for my brother, with my money. They didn't thank me. They expected it. That's when I realized I wasn't family. I was just convenient. So I walked away for good. If this story hit something in you, listen to the whole thing. Then tell me, did I do the right thing? Or was I wrong to finally put myself first? I need to hear what you do. I remember that morning was colder than usual, one of those sneaky Carolina chills that slides past your coat and sets up camp right along your spine. I wasn't planning to go back to Asheville that weekend. But Mom called. Said Dad wasn't feeling great, that Gavin might need a hand with something around the house. It wasn't a request. It never really was. I packed light, like always. Just a weekend bag and the vague hope that maybe, this time, it would feel different. The house looked the same as it always did. Peeling paint on the porch railing. Wind chimes Mom never dusted. The wreath on the front door still said, "Bless this mess," and I wondered, not for the first time, if it was meant to be ironic. Inside, the air smelled like lemon-scented wood polish and something overcooked. Familiar. Heavy. "You're just in time," Mom said, stepping aside so I could come in. She didn't hug me, didn't ask about the drive, just handed me a dish towel and pointed toward the sink, like I'd never left. Dad was in the recliner, half watching a game show rerun. He looked up, gave a slight nod, then went back to guessing trivia questions under his breath. I started to unpack in the guest room. Still had the same faded comforter from high school, the same posters on the wall that I never got around to taking down. Nostalgia can be a funny kind of ache. That's when I heard it. The low electric purr of a car engine. A second later, Gavin's laugh, a loud, carefree shout that cut through the silence of the cul-de-sac. I looked out the window and saw him pulling into the driveway in a brand new Tesla, red and gleaming like it had just rolled off a showroom floor. He revved it once, like a kid showing off a toy, then looped around the house for another lap. Mom appeared beside me, holding a basket of laundry. "Isn't she a beauty?" she said, beaming. "He deserves it. Finally got something to feel proud of, you know? I mean, everybody's got something these days. It was time he had his turn." I didn't say anything, but something in me shifted, quietly, like when a chair you've always trusted starts to wobble. At dinner, Gavin went on about the self-driving features, the stereo system, how strangers had already complimented him in the grocery store parking lot. Dad nodded along, smiling, like this was a family achievement. Nobody asked about my job. Nobody asked how I was doing. Later that night, in the bathroom, I sat on the closed toilet lid and pulled out my phone. Something had been gnawing at the edge of my thoughts all day. I opened my bank app, went to my savings account, then the bonus deposit I'd received last month. And then there it was. 10 days ago. Transfer to Roy and Helen Whitaker. $37,000. The entire performance bonus. Every cent. I stared at the screen for a long time. The numbers didn't change. My throat felt dry, but I wasn't shocked, not really. Not anymore. I'd told myself that money would help them pay off their debts. That it was for the roof repair Mom kept delaying, or Dad's overdue medical bills. I'd imagined their sighs of relief, the weight lifted from their shoulders. I didn't imagine a Tesla. Not parked in the driveway. Not bought without a conversation. Not gifted to Gavin like it was something he'd earned. And certainly not with the money I'd worked for, sacrificed for, bled a little for in long hours and late nights while they barely returned my calls. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. The kind where the sound of a fork hitting a plate feels louder than it should. We were all sitting around the same table I grew up at, scratches in the wood, one leg always a little off balance. Dad still used his faded recliner cushion to prop up the chair he never replaced. Some things never changed. Except Gavin. He was glowing, practically bouncing in his seat, shoveling in meatloaf while talking nonstop about the Tesla. Regenerative braking, dog mode, the light show feature. I didn't even know what half of it meant, and I don't think he did either. But he was proud. Real proud. Dad leaned in, eyes lit up like he was looking at a miracle. "Did you show her the self-parking yet?" he asked Gavin, grinning. "I did," Gavin said, chewing as he talked. You just hit the app and boom, it backs itself into the garage. Like precision, not a scratch. Mom smiled too, setting down a fresh bowl of green beans in front of me like I was invisible and still somehow expected to host. It's amazing what technology can do now, she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. And he finally has something he can be proud of. He's needed this. I didn't respond. I cut into my meatloaf, which tasted like nothing. No one asked me about my work. No one mentioned the bonus. No one said thank you. Not that I expected it. I'd long since taught myself to swallow that kind of hope, but it still stung. Like pressing on a bruise to see if it's healed yet. Then Mom glanced over and said, as if it was a compliment, like it should make me feel better, "You've got a job, Lenora. You're doing fine. Gavin, he's just trying to find his footing." I looked up. She wasn't being cruel. That was the worst part. She believed what she was saying. Like my stability made me immune to hurt. Like I was so fine I didn't get to want or need anything anymore. "You think I don't need support?" I asked softly. Mom waved a hand. "Not like he does. You've always landed on your feet." As if that was effortless. As if I hadn't clawed my way into every opportunity, stayed late at work when everyone else clocked out, said yes to every weekend shift, every transfer, every extra project, just so I wouldn't be the kind of person they had to worry about. I stared down at my plate and remembered birthdays that were forgotten, Christmas gifts that came from the clearance rack, if they came at all. The way every time Gavin messed up, they covered for him. The time he wrecked Dad's old truck drag racing in high school and still got an accidents happen speech. The time I got a B+ and was told I needed to focus more. A month ago, Mom called me crying. Said they were drowning in credit card bills. That Dad's medical expenses had wiped out their savings. That Gavin was struggling again. She sounded so desperate. And I wired the full bonus that night. Now it sat in Gavin's driveway, wrapped in chrome and false hope. What no one at that table knew, or maybe didn't care to remember, was that Gavin had his license suspended last year. Speeding ticket he didn't pay. Too many points. He barely got it back 2 months ago. And they gave him a Tesla. "You think maybe that's a little dangerous?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Gavin laughed. "Come on, it's got sensors for everything. It's safer than anything you've ever driven." Dad chuckled. Mom didn't even look up. I felt like I was talking through a screen no one else could see. Like I wasn't part of this dinner, this family, this narrative of "he needs more, you're fine." Afterward, I stepped out onto the porch, phone in hand. The night air was thick and still, like it hadn't decided whether to rain or not. I needed to breathe, just for a second, before I said something I'd regret. My phone buzzed. "Marcy." I answered, and her face appeared, framed by the soft light of her kitchen. She was wearing her reading glasses and holding a glass of wine. "Well," she said, "you look like someone who just found out they're adopted." I tried to smile. Failed. "I'm fine," I said. She squinted at me. "That car. You still haven't told me whose money was it." I opened my mouth, closed it, then laughed. Or tried to. "That's a story," I said, but it came out flat. Marcy just looked at me, the way only someone who knows you can. "You know," she said, "you don't have to carry everything just because you can." I nodded. My throat burned, but I didn't cry. Not yet. I knew it was coming, though. I could feel it, pressing against my ribs, waiting. The next morning, I found Mom in the kitchen, folding towels at the counter like it was the most urgent thing in the world. The dishwasher hummed behind her, and the coffee pot had long since gone cold. She didn't look up when I walked in, just kept folding. I didn't bother with small talk. "Was it my bonus?" I asked flat. No lead up, no cushion. Just truth, tossed on the table like a wet rag. She paused mid-fold. Her hands didn't move, but her face stayed calm. Too calm. "Lenora," she said, without turning. "I don't think this is the time. It's not a hard question." She sighed. A long, tired sound that felt rehearsed. "Why does it matter where it came from? We needed it. Gavin needed it." I stepped closer. "I wired you $37,000. You told me it was to keep the house from defaulting. It was, she said quickly. Part of it.
Part of it.
I repeated.
She finally looked at me.
Her eyes were glassy, but not teary. Just full of something I couldn't quite name. Defensiveness, maybe. Or quiet resentment. You think money is the only thing worth talking about in this family? She said. That stopped me for a second. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I suddenly realized she really believed that was the problem. No, I said. But I think honesty might be a good place to start. Dad walked in then, rubbing the back of his neck, still in his undershirt. He looked between us like he'd walked into the middle of a show he didn't understand. What's going on? Your daughter thinks we've committed a crime, Mom said, her voice sharp, but her hands still busy with the towels. I turned to Dad. Did you know the money I sent went to Gavin's car? He scratched the back of his head. Sweetie, he's had a rough go of it. That job at the warehouse didn't work out, and you know how hard it's been Since what? I asked. Since he failed another certification class? Since he blew off therapy? Since he bailed on rent last year and moved back in? Dad shifted.
He just needs a chance.
He's not strong like you. There it was. The sentence that wrapped every slight, every oversight, every painful silence into one neat little bow.
Not strong like you.
I felt something splinter, quietly, in the part of me that had always tried to understand them. The part that said, they're trying. The part that kept paying, showing up, forgiving. I remembered begging for a scholarship interview my senior year, writing essays at the kitchen table while Gavin played video games on full volume. I remembered working doubles at the diner, walking home at midnight, while he took the family car to meet his friends. I remember Mom telling me over and over, he's a boy. He'll figure things out in his own time. But me? I had to be on it. I had to plan, provide, predict. I crossed my arms, not even trying to mask the shake in my voice. Why didn't you just ask me? I said. Why not say, hey, Lenora, we want to use your money for a car for Gavin? Why lie about it? Because we knew you'd say no, Mom snapped, suddenly loud. And I didn't want to make him feel ashamed. He already thinks he's a failure. So instead, you made me feel like a fool. She flinched. Don't make a scene, she said, quieter now. Please. Don't make your brother feel guilty. That's not what he needs. I laughed. I didn't mean to, it just came out. I'm not the one who should feel guilty, I said. But somehow, I'm always the one who has to act like everything's fine. And that's when I saw it clearly, what I'd always known, deep down, but never said out loud. My worth in this house had a condition. As long as I didn't complain, didn't question, didn't ask for anything. Love here came with terms and silence. I walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water. Gavin was standing by the fridge. He must have come in during the argument, but no one noticed. He raised an eyebrow. You're really upset about this? I didn't answer. He looked genuinely confused. Then he gave a little shrug and said, You've got money, Lenora. You should be happy for me. And just like that, the last thread snapped. Not because of what he said, but because he meant it. Because in his world, that made sense. Because in this family, my success was never mine to celebrate. It was always theirs to spend. The rain had come quietly, a soft gray drizzle that made everything outside the cafe window look like it was wrapped in gauze. I sat across from Marcy at Redfern Cafe, cradling a chipped white mug full of decaf I hadn't touched. We'd claimed the table by the corner, our usual spot when either of us needed to say something we weren't sure how to begin. She was already halfway through her latte, flipping her stir stick between her fingers. You look like hell, she said gently, not unkindly. I gave a half smile. Feels about right. Outside, a man in a rain poncho biked by, tires hissing against the wet pavement. I followed him with my eyes, then stared down at the mug again. I found out where the bonus went, I said after a moment. She raised an eyebrow. They bought Gavin a Tesla. With my money. Marcy blinked. The entire bonus? Every penny. She didn't speak right away. Just leaned back in the booth and crossed her arms. You tell them how you feel? I nodded. Didn't make a dent. I started explaining everything: my parents' silence, Gavin's entitlement, the way my dad looked at me like I disappointed him just by asking questions. Words spilled out in clumps, sharp at the edges, like I'd been holding them in too long, and now they were coming out with splinters. Marcy listened, the way she always did. Not interrupting, not trying to fix anything. Then she said, "You know what's funny? I stayed in my marriage 2 years longer than I should have because I kept thinking maybe if I just loved him better, he'd turn into someone who loved me back the same way." She smiled sadly. "Turns out, it doesn't work like that." I looked at her. She shrugged. I kept scrubbing floors, folding his laundry, making his favorite meals, hoping he'd notice. But he didn't want a wife, he wanted a housekeeper with benefits. And I thought, maybe if I'm good enough, he'll see me. I swallowed. And did he? Marcy gave a quiet laugh. He saw me, just not in the way I wanted. We sat in silence for a moment. The rain tapped harder on the window now, steady and patient. Somewhere in the cafe, someone was humming along to a cover of Landslide playing low over the speakers. She looked back at me. "Your parents saw your strength, Lenora. They saw how capable you were. But they turned it into a reason to stop caring for you. That's not your fault. That's survival mode twisted into family values." I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the heat on my cheeks. No sobbing, no shaking, just a quiet, slow leak I couldn't stop. Marcy reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "My mom did the same thing to me," she said. "Took my savings account to bail my brother out of gambling debt. Told me it was what family does." You know what I told her, years later? I shook my head. I said, "You didn't protect me, you used me." Those words landed in my chest like something heavy and sharp. Because they were true for me too. I wiped my face with a napkin and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since the moment I arrived in Asheville. On the drive back, the rain was light but steady, just enough to make the windshield wipers work harder than they needed to. I passed the turnoff to my parents' street without slowing down. I wasn't ready to go back. Not yet. Somewhere between two traffic lights, I pulled onto the shoulder and parked. My hands were shaking, but not from fear this time. Just a buildup of everything that had gone unsaid. I scrolled to Mom's name in my contacts. Hit dial. She answered on the third ring. "Lenora?" Her voice was clipped, maybe surprised. Maybe not. I kept my tone steady. "I'm not sending any more money. Ever." Silence. "And if you still think silence equals love, then you never understood who I am." There was a pause, so brief I almost missed it before she said, "Well, that's a shame." I hung up without another word. And I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. I just felt free. Not entirely. Not yet. But enough to keep driving forward without looking back. I woke up before the sun, the way I used to during finals week in college, body wired, mind already running. The house was still. Quiet in that particular kind of way that feels heavier than silence. I wrapped myself in Dad's old flannel robe that had been hanging behind the guest room door since I was 17. It still smelled faintly of cedar and Vicks. Downstairs, I curled up on the living room couch with a mug of coffee and stared at the wall of family photos across from me. Every frame had its place, lined up like a gallery of Gavin's greatest hits, his high school baseball team, his college orientation shot, even though he dropped out by midterms, his senior prom where he wore that awful white tux with the crooked bow tie. My eyes scanned the wall for a picture of me. There was one in the corner, half tucked behind a fake potted plant. Middle school braces and a haircut I'd begged not to get. No photo from my college graduation. No picture from the regional award ceremony when I won Logistics Analyst of the Year. Nothing from the time I bought my first car outright. Used, yes, but it was mine. I sipped the coffee. It had gone cold already. A memory snuck in. 5th grade. I'd won the district spelling bee. I came home grinning, clutching my ribbon. Mom smiled, gave me a quick hug, then asked if I could keep Gavin entertained while she cooked dinner. He had the flu, she said. He needed the attention more than I did. That ribbon ended up stuffed in the junk drawer, crumpled between expired coupons and broken pens. Back then, I didn't know what to call the feeling.
But I know now.
It's what happens when praise is rationed, and you're not the one who gets the last slice. The house creaked as the HVAC kicked in. I rose to grab another blanket, and that's when I saw the envelope on the hall table. A manila folder with a rubber band around it, thick with unopened mail. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe because I already knew, deep down, there'd be something inside I couldn't unsee. Stacked inside were medical bills, electricity bills, credit card statements, all past due, all unopened. Taped to the top was a sticky note in Mom's handwriting. Leave it for now. Lenora always sends something. The words blurred as I stared at them. My pulse got loud. I reread it 3 times. Same message. Same betrayal. That was the twist I didn't see coming. Not the car, not the silence, not the gaslighting. It was the assumption.
The certainty.
They hadn't lied because they were desperate. They lied because they were used to lying. Because it worked. Because I had always come through. My hands shook as I flipped through the stack. Over $9,000 owed to Wakefield Medical. 3 shut-off warnings from Duke Energy. 4 missed minimum payments on a Visa card Gavin probably used. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was the backup plan. The safety net. The guarantee. And the worst part? I'd let them. Over and over again. I'd made it easy. Convenient. Painless. I sat down on the edge of the couch, the weight of the folder on my lap, my breath coming in shallow bursts. A voice in my head, small but cruel, whispered, "Maybe they're right. Maybe you're only valuable when you're useful." And then another voice, one I hadn't heard in a while, rose up and answered, "No. You're just the only one who never asked for anything." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't smash the picture frames or light the folder on fire. I just sat there and let the truth settle like dust in my lungs. They didn't need to thank me because they never saw it as a gift. Just part of the contract I hadn't realized I'd signed. Later that morning, I got dressed without saying a word to anyone. Gavin was still asleep, and Mom was outside, probably watering the same plants she always forgot to bring in when frost hit. I folded the flannel robe and laid it across the foot of the bed. Before I left the house, I placed the envelope of bills back on the hall table. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. Walking out, the air felt clearer than it had in days. Crisp. Honest. And as I reached the car and looked back at the house, I thought, I used to believe that staying silent was the kindest thing I could do for them. But now I know that silence didn't make me kind. It made me disappear. I told them I had to leave early. Claimed a last-minute work meeting popped up in Charlotte. Urgent, unavoidable. It wasn't true, but it gave me cover for what I really needed. One clean break, dressed up as a polite exit. Mom insisted on cooking dinner. Meatloaf again, with instant mashed potatoes and the same overcooked green beans she always made when she was trying to hold something together. The table was set like it was a holiday. Napkins folded. Candles lit. She even used the nice dishes. Gavin walked in late, still smelling like cologne and entitlement. Dad sat down with a sigh, cracking his knuckles like the whole thing was already too much. I waited until everyone had a plate in front of them before I spoke. "I've decided to buy a place in Charlotte," I said, quietly at first. "It's small, but it's mine. I already signed the papers." No one said anything. "I'm also moving everything out of the shared account," I added. "Going forward, I'll be handling my money separately." Mom blinked, as if I'd just spoken in another language.
Dad kept chewing.
Gavin looked up from his phone. "What do you mean, separately?" Mom asked. Her voice was tight, controlled, like she already knew, but hoped if she asked softly enough, I'd walk it back. "I mean, I won't be sending money anymore. I won't be covering the bills, the insurance, the extras." Her fork hit the plate. "I can't believe you'd say something like that over meatloaf." I didn't plan for this conversation to happen over anything, but here we are. She looked down. "After everything we've done for you, done for me," I said, not raising my voice. "Or taken from me, because I wouldn't fight back?" Dad pushed his chair back and stood. Quiet like always. "I'm going to lie down," he muttered. Didn't even look at me. Mom stayed seated, tears gathering in her eyes. But they didn't fall. "You've always been the strong one, Lenora," she said. "I thought you understood. Gavin's different. He needs more. You never asked for anything." "Maybe that was the problem," I said. Gavin chuckled. That low, dismissive sound that used to push every button I had. "So, this is about the car?" I turned to him.
Calm.
Steady.
No.
"This is about the moment you told me I should be happy for you, because I had money." He raised an eyebrow, smirked. "This is about the fact that you, my little brother, said out loud what everyone else in this house only thought. That my value is measured by what I can give. That the only time I'm worth mentioning is when I'm silent, helpful, and out of the way." He shrugged, like it wasn't worth arguing. "That's not what I meant. But it's what you believe." He didn't deny it. I turned back to Mom. "It's not about the Tesla. It's about what that car represents." She wiped her nose with her napkin. "You're punishing us." "No," I said. "I'm just done auditioning for a role I never got cast in." We ate in silence after that. At least they did. I pushed food around my plate, stomach too tight to manage a bite. The candles flickered in their holders like they were nervous to stay lit. After dinner, I went upstairs to pack. The house felt colder, heavier, like even the walls were tired of pretending. When I came back down, my bag zipped and ready, I noticed my purse sitting a little differently than I'd left it. I opened the flap. Inside, tucked beneath my keys, was an envelope. $500 in cash. A post-it note stuck to it read, "For gas." I didn't react right away. Just stood there in the hallway, letting the weight of it settle. Then I walked back to the dining table, placed the envelope in the center, and pulled a piece of paper from the notepad by the phone. I wrote, "I don't need money. I need respect. But I know that costs too much around here." I folded the note, placed it on top of the envelope, and walked out the front door for the last time. The air was cool, the sky already slipping into evening. I didn't look back. Not once. Because the truth was, they hadn't seen me hurting. Not because they didn't care, but because I'd spent my whole life making sure they didn't have to. And tonight, I let that silence go. The house was still dark when I woke up. The kind of quiet you only get before dawn, when even the birds haven't decided to start their day yet. I didn't turn on the lights. I moved through the house slowly, careful not to make any noise, like I was sneaking out of someplace I never truly belonged. I packed my things into the trunk of my car, one bag at a time. Nothing fancy, just my suitcase, my laptop, the folder of work documents I kept in my glove box like a security blanket. I double-checked the back seat, even though I already knew I hadn't left anything behind. At the front door, I paused. It looked the same as it always had. The faded welcome mat with the fraying corners. The chipped paint on the frame that Dad always said he'd fix next summer. The porch light flickering just slightly, like it couldn't decide whether to burn out or hold on a little longer. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in. Not to say goodbye, exactly. Just to acknowledge that this place had shaped me, even if it never made room for me. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Gavin. He stopped at the top of the steps, arms crossed. He didn't look angry, just tired. Or maybe confused. We stared at each other for a second that felt longer than it was. "I don't get you," he said finally. His voice was quieter than I'd expected. I mean, I guess I never did. But maybe it's because I never had to. That was probably the closest thing to an apology I was going to get. I didn't answer. There wasn't much left to say. He didn't offer a hug. I didn't reach for one. I stepped off the porch and opened my car door. The air was cool, still holding on to the night. I felt like I could actually breathe. The engine started with a quiet hum, and I pulled out of the driveway without looking back. No tears. No dramatic music playing in my head. Just the soft rhythm of tires on pavement and the quiet thrum of my own pulse settling into something that felt like peace. Charlotte was still 2 hours away, but I wasn't in a rush. I took the long way, winding through back roads with big oak trees leaning over the asphalt like they were trying to offer shade or shelter. The clouds were low and heavy, but it hadn't started raining yet. Around halfway home, I saw the sign for Red Fern Cafe and made the turn without thinking. Marcy was already there, sitting by the window with 2 mugs on the table. One for her, one for me. She looked up when I walked in and nodded like she'd been expecting me the whole time. I slid into the booth and wrapped my hands around the warm mug. We didn't say much at first. Just sat there in the quiet, letting the steam rise and the morning settle. Finally, she asked, "You okay?" "I think so," I said. "I think I'm not broken." That's a start. We both smiled a little, but it wasn't forced. We didn't need to talk about what happened. Not really. She could see it in my face, and I could feel it in the way my shoulders had dropped an inch, in the way I wasn't bracing for the next emotional blow. Sometimes, healing doesn't come in big moments or loud declarations. Sometimes, it's just sitting across from someone who sees you, sipping lukewarm coffee in a booth that smells like cinnamon and old wood. We stayed a while. Long enough for the waitress to refill our cups and the sky to shift from gray to pale blue. When I finally stood to leave, Marcy didn't say goodbye. She just squeezed my hand and said, "Drive safe." I nodded. Back in the car, I glanced at my reflection in the rearview mirror. There were circles under my eyes, and my hair was a little messy from the wind. But there was something else too, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Stillness. Not the heavy kind that settles when you've given up, but the quiet steadiness of someone who finally stopped asking for permission to feel whole. I didn't know what my life was going to look like now. Didn't have a 5-year plan, didn't have anyone waiting for me at home. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't dragging guilt behind me like a second suitcase. I wasn't shrinking, compromising, or apologizing. I was just me, and that was enough. It's been a month since I left that house, and everything that came with it. My apartment in Charlotte isn't big. A 1-bedroom walk-up with scuffed hardwood floors and a view of the street. But it gets the morning light just right. I open the curtains before the sun rises now, just so I can watch it spill in through the windows. The light feels different here, cleaner, quieter. Like a beginning I didn't know I was waiting for. The place has its quirks. The bathroom fan sounds like it's coughing up its last breath, and the oven runs 10 degrees too hot. The walls are thin enough to hear the neighbor's TV if I stay up late. But every inch of this space is mine. Not borrowed, not handed to me with a string of expectations attached.
Mine.
Last weekend, I finally hung a few pictures. Just me, no family portraits, no group shots where I'm pushed to the edge. One from a hike I took solo back in Asheville, another from a company dinner where I actually laughed, not just smiled for the camera. I framed them myself. Picked out 2 watercolors from the Sunday art market. Soft reds and blues. They don't match anything else in the apartment. And no one here to tell me they need to. Marcy came over Thursday afternoon, her sunglasses still perched in her hair and a nearly finished iced latte in hand. She handed me a small brown bag. "This reminded me of you," she said, casual as ever. Inside was a small wooden frame. No photo, just a phrase printed in clean, dark letters. "I am not a backup plan." I held it longer than I meant to. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I did.
Completely.
I set it on my desk, next to the lamp that came from my first solo trip to Target without checking prices. We didn't talk much that afternoon. Just sat in the kitchen with our coffee, and the kind of silence that feels like friendship, not absence. That night, my phone buzzed on the counter while I was making tea. It was a text from my mother. "Dad's in the hospital. Blood pressure. If you want to know." "No, hi." "No, we miss you." Just that, 10 words and a cliff edge. I stared at it for a while. Not because I didn't care about my father, but because I knew what that text really meant. It wasn't a bridge, it was bait. The same pattern I'd answered to for years. Trouble equals obligation. Their need equals my sacrifice. But I didn't reply. Not right away. I turned off the kettle, sat down at the kitchen table, and let the silence stretch out like a blanket. It didn't feel cold. It felt honest. Later that week, Aunt Sylvia called. She talks a lot, mostly about gardening and the neighbor's new fence, but somewhere between cucumber vines and soup recipes, she mentioned that Gavin sold the Tesla. Couldn't afford the maintenance. Insurance was bleeding him dry. He moved in with a girl from town and took a job fixing cars at a small garage. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just breathed. Dad came home from the hospital. Mom started cooking instead of ordering out. They're managing. No one's starving. No one's asking me for money. They're finally living within their means, and the sky hasn't fallen. I didn't want to see them fail. I didn't want Gavin to lose anything. I just needed proof. Proof that their survival never required my destruction. That they could stand without leaning on my back. And now they are. One afternoon, I wandered into a used bookstore off East Tremont. No errands to run. No agenda. Just walking because I could. I let my fingers graze the spines of books I didn't know I needed. I bought one with a green cover and a sketch of a woman walking alone beneath a tree. I didn't read the summary. I just liked the feeling it gave me when I picked it up. That's something I'm learning, to choose things big and small simply because they make me feel something that isn't exhaustion or duty. Walking home, I passed the bakery near my block. The smell of cinnamon rolls curled out into the street. I almost stopped, not because I was hungry but because I could. And that's when I realized I didn't feel guilty. Not for leaving. Not for staying gone. Not for being happy in a life they don't get to shape. I used to believe that family was a place you're always welcome. That no matter what happened, no matter how much you gave or how little they gave back, you stayed because that's what family does. But I see it differently now. Family isn't blood that demands silence. It's not a title you earn by sacrifice. It's not a weight you carry to make other people more comfortable. Real family is where you can be your full self, without apology, without earning it first. It's the place you don't have to pay to be loved. And if that place didn't exist for me growing up, then I'll build it. Brick by brick. Cup of coffee by cup of coffee. With people who don't need my money to believe in my worth. The last time I sent money to my parents was October of last year. The first time I felt free, truly, deeply free, was October of this one. Before I go, I just want to say this. Not every story ends with a grand gesture. Sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is quietly choose ourselves after years of choosing everyone else. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you're there now. And if you are, I hope you know this. Love that asks you to disappear isn't love worth staying for. Have you ever walked away from something that once felt impossible to leave? If this story spoke to you in any way, I'm grateful you stayed with me until the end. I hope you'll join me again next time for more stories that don't shout, but still stay with you long after they're over.